Well, it's very disappointing, but our hunt is over, and it hasn't been a disappointing hunt at all, but we are packing up here, getting ready to go. About the only thing left to do is take the wall tent down, and we'll be on our way. So I just wanted to spend some time on a video talking through strategy and what we learned from this. We made a couple mistakes. There's definitely some things we could have done better, and it's always fun to learn and learn from your mistakes even. So as I'm driving home here, the 17-hour drive, I'm going to really think through the process and take some notes, and then when you see me next, I'll be back at home, and we'll have a discussion about what we learned from this trip. And if you ever decide you want to do it, I'll try to help you be effective and efficient in these Wyoming backcountry bears. Hey everybody, I'm back in Minnesota and just kind of debriefing from this Wyoming bear hunt, and I wanted to share a few things with you about the strategy that we employed and some things that we learned, what worked, what didn't work, and so forth. Because first of all, I want to record this in case I do this again someday so I can go back and refer to it. And also there's some of you who may be interested in hunting in the mountains in a do-it-yourself public land situation, and you would want to have this information. So here goes. There's three main categories of things I want to talk about. The first thing is the location that we chose for the baiting. It's really difficult because you have to choose a section, a square mile section of land, and there's one outfitter in that valley that has 28 sections already claimed, and when he claims a section, he claims them for that entire year, whether he hunts spring or fall or whatever. And then also he has first chance to claim those sections again the following year. So you really have to work hard at kind of finding a place that's maybe a little bit overlooked to try to find a great section that has a good bait location in it, because the majority of them are taken up year after year after year. And then the fact that you have to register the sections in person at a game and fish office means that if you're traveling from a long distance, you have to do basically what I did, and that is really analyze stuff with OnX maps or base maps or whatever, and then look at Google Earth and try to analyze the terrain, look at topographic maps, and try to determine, based on what you know about bears, what their travel patterns might look like. Then you also have to take into account the scent. So what I decided to do was concentrate on places where I felt like bears might be traveling in the evenings. And so that was ridges, but not high ridges, not mountaintop type ridges, but ridges where it would be open, where a mature male bear would rather walk than, say, right down in a bottom of a draw where it's real thick and he'd have to push his way through and so forth. Bears are going to take the path of least resistance. So I was looking for places where ridges ran into other types of things, and so a convergence of different travel patterns is what I'm looking for. For example, one of our good baits was, there is a creek that runs in the bottom of this valley, and it's got willows all around it and everything like that. It's really good cover, and there was a game trail along this creek, and shooting up from that was a canyon that went up into a big mountain basin. And so that looked to me like an area where the bears, number one, would use that game trail going down through that canyon, and also the trail that is along that creek would funnel bear activity. And so you have to be 200 yards from water. So we hiked up that canyon, actually ended up going up there about 200, probably 270 yards, 250. Then my thought was that the Northwoods Gold Rush that we're using, and the smell of the bait and everything like that, as it cools off in the evening, the air that's cooling down starts to go downhill, and it would push the scent of that bait down into that valley where that creek was. So you got bears that are using this trail and bears that are using this trail, and that turned out to be a pretty effective method on actually 3 of the 4 baits. Worked out that way pretty well. So that's one thing. That's the type of locations that I was looking for. And setting your stands, it just seemed like it helped to set your stand above the bait if possible, but not above to the point where the evening thermals are going to take your scent in the stand right to the bait. So you got to get off to one side a little more or another. And I also kind of picked up some nuggets of information about location from Nick Hopkins, who has Boar Masters, and he was very helpful to me and open with me, even though he knows I'm sponsored by Northwoods Bear Products and he owns a competing company. He's just a great guy and was helpful. And a couple other guys that I know that I called who have bear hunted in the mountains before, you know, they gave me a nugget or two here that I was able to use that information. So that's on the location aspects, that's what seemed to work the best. The barrels that I use, here's another factor. My theory was, as I mentioned in an earlier video, is that if the bears could stick their paw in and pull the bait out, then they wouldn't mess with the barrels and tear them off the trees and bust them up and chew them up and stuff like that. And that proved to be true, but it did give us a different issue that we had to deal with. We only had one bear that partially pulled a barrel off the tree, and it was just a ginormous bear that just came on the bait like in the last 3 days we were there, and never came in during the daylight, but just a huge 400-pound gigantic bear that was a nighttime bear. He did mess with the barrel. He actually pulled some 2-inch lag screws out of the tree with the chain, and he tore the barrel lid off with his teeth. That was the only bear that really messed with the barrels very much. So the rest of them, you know, the theory worked that if they could just freely get the bait out, excellent. It worked great. The problem is, in Wyoming, you have to enclose your bait in a barrel, and if the bears, if there's bait on the ground, you have to shovel it back into the barrel. Well, when you're using trail mix, and the outfitters out there, I talked to one of the guides, and they primarily use barley. So, and the outfitters in the mountainous terrain, they typically use a lot of grain, and boy, that makes it really tough to get that back into the barrel. So, you know, we had one bear that he just loved the pastries, and he would dig everything out and he'd eat the pastries, and when the pastries are gone, then he'd work on the other stuff. Well, that's quite a bit of bait on the ground, and if it's trail mix, which mostly it is, it's really hard to get it back into the barrel. So, you know, we used a shovel, and we did make a good faith effort to try to keep the bait in the barrel, put the bait back in the barrel, and then after, when we pulled out, some of the bait sites didn't have all of the bait cleaned up, and so we had to take the bait out with us. And so I feel like we did a good job of making a good faith effort of trying to do that, but the reality is, you know, you got peanuts and stuff like that are down in the grass and kind of spread around, and you can't completely pick up every piece of bait. So looking at that, you know, I might do the barrel a little bit differently if I tried to do it again. The third thing is, there's no surprise that the sprays and scents that we used work just as well in the mountains as they do in the northern boreal forests like Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ontario, where all these other places that I've hunted. The Gold Rush was terrific. The oil, and the bears getting that really good smelling oil on their feet and their fur, and the sprays that we use primarily the fruit type and berry type sprays like blueberry, cherry, and so forth, and they worked as well as they have in other places. So that was important. And then the fourth thing was the fact that we had really high quality bait, and I really think that you know, because the outfitters are primarily using grains, and a lot of other baiters, no matter where you go, aren't willing to go through the effort to get really good quality bait, you just can outcompete them. And when you're sectioning off the whole landscape into square mile sections, and everybody's got a bait in their own square mile section, you got to have quality bait to keep the bears on your bait. And the pastries and the trail mix, they really helped. I'm convinced of that. And the fifth and final thing is the issue of these bears going nocturnal. Now, it was pretty strange to have all daylight pictures at the beginning, and then all at once the bears all just went nocturnal. And I think they were just super sensitive in these areas where they rarely encounter humans on foot. Now, there's a lot of four-wheeler trails and motorcycle trails and so forth through those mountains, and they get quite a bit of use, especially on the weekends. So the bears are they're continually hearing four-wheelers go by on trails, and they probably smell people quite a bit, but the actual having somebody walk up, have that ground scent and so forth, and we did take precautions which helped, but these bears just went nocturnal quickly as soon as there was too much activity around the bait. I think once we started we were baiting every day, we were hanging stands and stuff like that, and it just shut them down from daylight activity. So I'm kind of wondering, and we discussed this in camp, if a guy would go out and wait until the season, instead of starting baiting a week before the season, what if you waited till the season started and then bait, and as soon as you had that bear hit, and he hit in the daylight, just move on him right then. Just go hang a stand and get there. And I kind of think that might be a good strategy. The problem is it can sometimes take several days to get a bear on the bait. We had one bait that got hit the second day. We had, I think, two that got hit, I think, the third or fourth day. We were getting pretty nervous about it. And then we had one bait that didn't get hit until the sixth day. And that turned out to be a bait that had two big chocolate bears on it. The giant one that I talked about, and then, but we did never get a daylight photo of those bears. Virgil did see one of those bears that was working his way around the bait. Didn't have a chance to shoot it with a bow. He said, if I had a rifle, I could have killed it. I just think maybe if a guy would minimize your intrusion, and as soon as you get a bear that hits the bait, bam, go after him right then. Maybe that would work better. So those are my thoughts. I'm still learning this process, and when you go to a completely new area, new terrain, new wind currents, and different behavior types and different foods, you just have to learn a lot, or you're not going to be successful. And unfortunately, we only got one bear out of the three of us, but we did have a total of 7 bears on 4 baits, and incredibly, all of them were brown bears. And to me, that adds a really fun aspect to this. So, if you have any questions, leave them in a comment below. Give me a like. I really appreciate your following this, and I hope you learned something from this that'll help you in your bear hunting in the future.